Welcome to Culture Talk. This is the segment where we talk about the intersection of faith and pop culture and how culturally relevant topics can be used to start conversations about your faith. I'm joined today with Ken Samples,
Hi,
philosopher
Sandra.
and theologian. Thank you for joining us.
Happy to do it.
Yeah, you know, one of the things I love about you is that you're such a deep thinker. You're very reflective. You even have a blog called Reflections. And you've talked before about how growing up, you were a person of faith, but you had a bit of a struggle kind of figuring out how to deal with your faith and then also logic and reason. And that's actually a common criticism that people feel like faith and reason are not compatible.
Yeah.
So how would you respond to that based on your experience?
Yeah, I can relate to that. When I was first in college as a young Christian, the church I went to, they didn't talk about reason. My philosophy classes, they didn't talk about faith. Kind of felt like a man without a country. What I discovered is that the word faith in the New Testament is very rich, Sandra. It means trust in a reasonable, reliable source. So from a biblical point of view, faith actually includes a reasonable, rational side. It's trust, and that's that critical element, but it's always trust in a reliable source, God, the person of Christ. And so biblical faith is not without reason and thought and careful thinking. And that's helped me at times when I felt pulled in one direction or another.
So you didn't have to check your brain in at the door, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and I couldn't. And lots of us would feel like, wow, do I have to choose between one or the other?
Right.
In Christian history, there have been great examples of people, St. Augustine, C.S. Lewis, men of great faith and devotion, and yet also people of brilliant, reflective intellect.
So thinking about logic and reason, like what would be the strongest evidence that Christianity is based on or is logical? It's a logical faith to embrace?
That's such an important question. I would say a couple things. I would say, when thoughtful people want to make sense of the world or solve problems, they appeal to reason, to logic, to mathematics. Well, Christianity, I think a powerful reason for being a Christian is that Christianity can explain, it can ground reason and rationality. We can trust reason. Logic flows from the mind of God. Mathematics is reliable. So that's kind of an invisible argument for God. But there are also some great other arguments. The beginning of the universe, the issue of morality. I was thinking even the other day, beauty. Beauty is a powerful argument for a God who has an aesthetic element. So I like to say God is the best explanation for the world and the life that we encounter here.
So that doesn't necessarily compel people to faith. So what would you say in kind of sharing your faith and sharing the logical reasons, like why aren't people persuaded by this truth?
That's an important element. If Christianity is as persuasive as some of us think it is, why doesn't everybody accept it? I think there are a couple factors. Remember that sin plays a role. So sin has affected all of us. The doctrine of original sin says that all of us have been influenced by sin. Human beings have choices they make in their life. And there are times where that process of persuasion has to go through various steps. So they may be unbelieving now, but later they may come to believe. And yet that issue of sin and other issues are relevant there. So we make our case, we pray, and we realize that we're saved not by arguments, we're saved by grace. We're saved by believing the story about Jesus' life, death, and resurrection.
Well, thank you so much for that. So
thank you.
If viewers want to catch more on this topic, where would you direct them?
Well, I have a blog called Reflections, and there's lots of hundreds of articles available there. I'd love if people would come to my blog.
Thank you so much for that, Ken. So again, if you want to hear more from Ken Samples, check out his Reflections blog. Visit reasons.org and search for Reflections.